Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Kasha. For those who don't know me, I'm the Chief of Staff here at New Power Labs. First, I want to acknowledge that I'm joining today from Treaty 13 territory, which was subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois, Ojibwe, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. As an organization focused on capital flows towards underfunded communities, New Power Labs is committed to partnering and supporting Indigenous communities in our research, our practices, and our partnerships. And we want to acknowledge the enduring harm that colonial and post-colonial policies have brought to Indigenous communities and the ways in which that continues to be disproportionate impact to Indigenous participation in Canada's economy. We're also welcoming the immense wisdom that these communities hold. And as an organization, we continue to educate ourselves to understand the intersectionality of Indigenous identity with other diversity lenses, to amplify the voices of Indigenous leaders and communities, and to hold ourselves accountable to reconciliation commitments. For those who are joining for the first time and who are less familiar with our work, New Power Labs focuses on moving capital to underfunded and overlooked communities. This work spans the diversity of Canada across gender identity, ethnicity, abilities, sexual orientation, citizenship status, language, and more. We work in partnership with those who deploy capital, from philanthropy to impact investing to venture capital to traditional finance. And we do this work with a growing group of core partners. This includes Duke Impact Lab, West Merriam ASEFA Fund, Coast Capital, Ontario Trillium Foundation, and Community Foundations of Canada. And more recently, we welcomed Inspirit Foundation. We also began working this year with Béati Foundation to build out our People and Capital Data Partnership, which is something that we're going to explore more today. So I'll introduce Tom Vargas, my colleague who is the research lead here at New Power Labs, to kick us off.
Thanks so much, Kasha. Hi, everyone. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. J'aimerais commencer avec quelques mots de bienvenue en français. On est heureux d'accueillir Maya Sakkal pour nous parler un peu du parcours que la Fondation Béati a suivi pour mettre en place des pratiques renforçant l'équité, la diversité et l'inclusion au sein de leur fondation. Thanks so much, Maya, for joining us. Maya Sakkal is the communications manager at the Béati Foundation. She holds a bachelor's degree in industrial design and a master's degree in project management. Maya has long chosen to live her values by spending much of her professional life working in the community sector and with nonprofit organizations. Among other roles, she worked for several years in Montréal Nord, focusing on citizen mobilization and poverty alleviation. Maya has been with the Béati Foundation as a communication manager for over a year. Welcome, Maya. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a very exciting conversation.
Yeah, looking forward to getting some of your thoughts. So before we start, I'd like to pull up a poll on the screen so we can have some audience participation. According to a recent Imagine Canada report, nonprofit leaders widely support the principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and see their value. And they believe that they are acting in accordance with them. What share of nonprofits surveyed by Imagine Canada would you say gathered data on gender for the people it serves and benefits? And the options are 10%, 41%, or 73%. Apparently, neither the host nor the panelists cannot vote. So Maya and I will just wait for everyone to to vote, put in their answers. And yeah, just there we go. So about 79% of you say 10%, and you would be correct. Very few organizations collect sort of data on the communities they serve, which I think is an important point that we'll return to later on in our conversation with Maya. And as I was about to say before the poll results pulled up, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat as we go along. But yeah, let's dig in, Maya. All right, so I have a first question, opening question around sort of the motivations around the Béati Foundation's journey on this diversity and inclusion journey. So the Béati Foundation, as I said, has joined this movement with regards to being more intentionally inclusive. I would love to hear your thoughts on why making specific commitments to equity, inclusion, and diversity are important to the Béati Foundation. Well, I'll leave it there and I'll ask you to guess.
Maybe I'll just start also by situating Béati. We're kind of a small-ish foundation. We're about like 3 people working there. At the moment, we serve the entirety of the province. So we try to help groups all around the province, mostly grassroots starting project. We try to work on systemic issues, and our mission is to be in solidarity with marginalized groups. So just that, if we want to be relevant with our mission, if we want to make sense of groups are doing, we had that sort of intuition that maybe there was some introspective work that needed to be done also as to are we doing what we can also on ourselves and how we manage our organization to be the best allies to those groups. And I think it's kind of started with a very just honest sense that we probably weren't that good in all of the fields. Like I think when it comes to the groups, we weren't that bad because we have we don't decide where the money goes. We have a committee that is for and by people from different communities, and they're the one who decides. So on certain things, we were like, okay, we have structure, we have like processes that helps us be more equitable. But on other things, especially like capital flow and all, we probably weren't. So that's sort of the starting point where we had a lot of good intentions, but what do we do with them?
Right, correct. And just to follow up quickly, so how long have you been sort of in this journey? What was sort of the catalyst of this sort of movement, and how far along do you think you are on this trajectory?
I think it's hard to answer completely because our team sort of changed in like a little bit a span of a year. So I think part of this change is with the rotation. And I think also that's part of the why we need more structure and we need more resources to keep those like values within the organization, because, well, we are not going to stay there for as long as possible. So how do we make sure that the people that comes after us have all the structure needed to maintain those engagement we have towards equity? So it's
totally,
so it's a long process, and I don't know if like we can find a starting point, but the starting point was probably like the starting point with you was probably like the change of the team and being anchored differently within the society.
Yeah, totally. I hear sort of the real importance about institutionalizing practices around equity, diversity, and inclusion. So back to thinking about your journey, what are some of the lessons that you have learned? One of them, I think, is this conversation we've had about institutionalizing sort of things so they don't get dropped. What other things have you learned as you've been through this process? What are the aha moments?
I think is that we don't all understand what it means, EDI, and sometimes some people will have, well, I mean, we all, if you just tell someone like equity, justice, diversity, inclusion, everyone's going to say yes, you know, so
of course.
But what does it mean? I think that's where people get lost or don't understand why. Like, I think we had a lot of work to do to just understand why it was important to do it, why we weren't doing it also, like why where were our dead angles, because some people thought we were doing it, so there were some things that wasn't grasped. And also, why look at it just from a capital flow? Like, what does it mean, capital flow? Like, is it just because we give money to the right, we had the sense we gave money to the right people, but what do we do with the rest of all of our money? Like, who are we, like, not just HR and governance, but also like, where are we investing? And that whole like 360-degree also conversation was maybe somewhat new for some people. So this whole like understanding what are we talking about, that was maybe like the biggest challenge maybe.
Yeah, I love that. Can you give specific examples of sort of what you actually mean by sort of doing this equity, diversity, inclusion work, and how it reflects in sort of your programming or who you support, and how it has changed over time?
I think why it's important. Well, like the committee of the selection committee is sorry, I'm trying to grasp my ideas and translate at the same time. So I think one of the things we did well was, for example, like the committee of selection, which is diverse, and we tried that. But then when it came, for example, language, I think there was a clash because there's in terms of language, when it comes to French, it's a very binary language fundamentally. So how do we make sure that we have the tools and the structure so that people understand why it's important to have pronouns, why it's important to be careful how we write, that we are like the French language is emphasizing the patriarchy. So how do we deconstruct that? What are the means to do it? So like, what are the policies we need? This is like something we've been working on this past 2 years to make more policies so that it stays and it's there, and also to create guides so that it helps people understand how to do it, because it's one thing to preach and say, but then how do you implement it, and how do you make it not like it's an extra task we need to do and it's hard and everything and we don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I love
it
that.
answers why your answer. I heard of it.
No, I love that idea, sort of. I think you're speaking to how even at a fundamental language level, it's important to align on what we actually are talking about and making sure that the language makes sense for different communities that you're serving. In this particular case, you're thinking about sort of like Francophones, right? And in Quebec and across Canada, perhaps, right? For whom some of these terms might not resonate, right? And so doing that work is at base, fundamental, so that you can, move forward in sort of other equity in other equitable ways. So I guess one question I have for you is, in your journey, aside from thinking about language, are there other instances in which you have felt any pushback with regards to moving forward on diversities that have initiatives that have an emphasis or place an emphasis on equity, diversity, and inclusion?
We haven't had strong pushbacks, I don't think, because fundamentally I think the values were always there. So we had we have the basis. I think the pushback was, does it need to be institutionalized? Like, do we need all these rules? Do we is it too complicated? Are we like being too obsessive over this? Is it really coming from the groups, or is it like just some like woke dialogues and we just have to do it because everyone is doing it? Those are the conversations that are also very necessary, because we need to like stop polarizing that conversation and just come back to the values that we're all preaching and we're all fighting for. So like, how do we I have the French word fédérer, like how do we commune everyone on the same page and be on the same like boat that is going on that direction? That's the biggest challenge. And because we made the choice historically to have like a lot of committee, well, that's a lot of different people who are living different things and are invested, not giving the same amount of time. So not just the board, but all the committees. So how do we create this like collective narrative, and how do we centralize our those intentions?
I'm going to pick up on something you said, which I thought was very powerful, which is this idea that it's not like the Béati that is going on this lone journey, right? It's sort of trying to build, a community, right, that is also engaged in doing this work, so that you co-create, something that, and to reference our previous point, something that's institutionalized, right? Something that is able to survive, whether or not Béati is leading it, for example, or not, right? Something that, really lives to everyone's values and that is making actual change. I think that was fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing that.
To be honest.
So I'm going to move along a little bit and try to talk now about moving away from Béati and thinking more generally about philanthropy and how what sort of the path it's been in regards to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Would you give us a sense of how the sector is doing with regards to those issues? And as you sort of give us your opinion on that, it'd be really cool for those of us outside of Quebec for you to reflect specifically on the differences between philanthropy, let's say in Quebec versus in the rest of Canada. Also assuming, right, that Quebec is obviously not fully homogeneous, but that there might be some differences there that might make sense to leverage.
That question can get loaded. Well, I mean, Quebec have this reality that is both paralleling the history of Canada and was part of colonizing, was part of like capitalism, of racism, systemic racism, and at the same time, there's like this parallel conversation where it's like they also that's what I hear, when we talk about it within the community, is like there's also this posture of like, but they were also colonized. So there's this double like reality that is somewhat not working together, or there's an issue of positionality of knowing like, okay, you can go through your own struggles, but that doesn't mean you're not contributing to other struggles. And that sort of double posture is conflicting. And I remember a militant, an advocate, an advocate person from like way back who told me like Quebec is like it's like their identity is at the teenage year, and their mother left them and their father is kind of abusive. So I always thought like this image is, I mean, I can't see it. Like there's a lot of like identity crisis, and we see it with the policies that are being pushed and the bills like Bill 21, Bill 96. It's all about identity. So this is like where we're at, and it's polarizing people. And there's this feel that all the EDI conversations is coming from the Anglos. So where are the conversations that are from within? That's I think what is happening, but it's not as present as we would like it. Like it's always feel like it's coming from the outside. So make the change from within. I think that's the if I can place, and I'm not an expert, like I'm talking sort of like giving you like very just like impression. So if people don't agree, I'd be very curious to like hear from that also.
Yeah.
And in terms of the sector though, I feel there's kind of like, if you mean philanthropy sector, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. My impression is that we have like very important leaders, like philanthropists, like foundation that are major players that are taking that road to like more equity, more justice, more. And for me, it gives me a lot of hope, like for that, like that. I see that at least we have strong leaders that are taking that. So yes, there's this tension, but there's also like strong inspiration work that is happening also.
Yeah, it's an amazing answer. Thank you so much for sort of situating sort of the Quebec in its history, right? And so I think something that I would love to unpack if we had some time is sort of thinking through so given that there might be some resistance and that people might in Quebec might think that a lot of this EDI work is being imposed from Anglophone Canada. What are the ways in which you talk about these issues, right, with your partners that might help sort of make it more of a local grassroots sort of issue? Does it have to do with the words that you're using? Do you stay away from things like EDI, or is it maybe it has something to do with the relationships that you build?
There's when it comes, for example, like the example of the language I was saying earlier, that's something that I realize is also the struggle of like having an inclusive language in French is not the same as in English. Like for non-binary people, we had to invent a third pronoun that didn't exist in the language. So I think that's it takes, maybe there's like these extra steps that needs to like happen so that we can all like afterwards understand where it comes to understand what are the tools we can create and how to like make them spread.
Yeah.
It's, I think, like it really comes back to having those conversations from within and what is our purpose as foundations. Like we are serving groups that are marginalized. Marginalization is not something that belongs to one group or another. It happens through history, and it always has been different people, and it's always changing. So if we're gonna still want to be relevant, I think the conversation is just like go back to the roots of what we're trying to do. It's just we're trying to serve people who are struggling for their rights, struggling for their well-being, struggling for their health, basic like fundamental rights. So if we frame that conversation more around what are the needs that are coming from the field, and we keep that connection with the field, then it's not about who is trying to tell us what it is to be a good foundation. It's about how we do our job best. And I feel that's how you shift the conversation, is like you don't focus on your role as maybe or not, like it's subjective. Are we a victim of propaganda from I don't know where? Are we listening to the people we're saying we're trying to serve?
That's so well said, and sort of really paints a picture of sort of the immensity of the challenge. And so something that occurs to me is that it's obviously, if we're thinking about something that is, trying to it seems to me that it's not exclusively a foundation's role to sort of engage in doing all this work, right? Sort of at a society level, it feels like even a broader challenge. And so I guess that I'm just saying that you're but one part of sort of this really big heavy lift that we all have to be doing. And I guess we're grateful that so many organizations like yours are doing this work. So back to something that you had mentioned previously, you were saying a little bit about that you were seeing some things that were exciting to you about philanthropy and the philanthropy sector. I would love to get your thoughts on anything that you think is exciting and worth emulating, again, around philanthropy, any particular practices that you think are helpful, and as well, anything that you think might not be as helpful, anything like that.
Well, I think you sort of touched it without like explicitly saying, is the fact that we aren't alone in this quest. Like every foundation is trying to do better, is trying to serve better. And so I think that's what's exciting, is that I see more collaboration between, I don't know if there's more, because I've only been there a year, so I'm going to be just honest, but I feel like this, when we collaborate and when we work together, that's where like there's a lot of potential. And like for that, we need also to be just like aware of what is our role as foundation, like what's like we're a cog, like you said, in a big machine. Like how as a cog we can, what are our resources and what are our capacity, and when we can't, who can we go get to help us?
Right.
Like for example, the work we are doing with you, like we're not analysts of data, like we needed partners for that, but we do other things. We give money to other people, and we sometimes are more than one foundation who give money to one group. Or so how do we communicate and make it like as less a burden for the group? There's a chance of communication here there to make sure that we could, like, for example, like that's something, I'm saying this because that's something that comes up a lot from the groups, is that they want foundation to talk to each other more, because they feel like they're always like repeating the same things to everyone, and like it's for them it feels like we don't talk to each other, which we do, but maybe we don't always talk about the things they need us to talk about. So that's the whole also like collaboration. I think if we learn more to collaborate together, we will get further. And I see a lot of like major player, like I was saying, doing amazing work that is very inspiring. Like just recently, kind of recently, McConnell like announced that they were going to shift from 100% like impact investment, and this is carving ways for smaller foundations that don't have the resources to like do that shift, but if they see others do it, they can maybe learn from them, see, okay, where are they investing? Maybe we can like share that information also. So like that helps others, because we have to recognize McConnell, they have like I think 40 employees, so like 40 employees can do the same heavy lifting as So the solidarity also between foundation, understanding that there are some major players, but there are a lot of small foundation all around Quebec that either have only one employee or no employee, sometimes just the board. So like, how do we make sure that everyone can like do all this amazing work that is being like carved by others?
Yeah, totally. I think one thing to think about, I mean, and we sort of started the conversation with that poll, right? Most foundations, right, think very carefully about and seem to value, things that we are aligned on with regards to equity, diversity, and inclusion. But it seems like it probably is challenging, right, to get a community of organizations and foundations and align clearly on some of these issues. Do you find that, thinking about solidarity among foundations and building community, is it always easy, even if on the surface everybody feels like they have aligned on values? Is it always easy in practice to sort of do work together?
Probably not. I think we're all like, we all have too much to do and we all have to be good at so many things. So this is where
Yeah.
also like sometimes partners are not always other foundation, but people with a complementary expertise too. Like it's not about just creating links with other foundation, but creating links with other actors, strong actors around us that have expertise that we don't. And it always comes back to what do we have and what can we go get outside. So like understanding where you're standing and what are your powers, that's where you can sort of like find the right partners. And it has to be, for a collaboration to work, I mean, it's not rock science, it has to be beneficial for both parties. So if both people are gaining time from this collaboration, then it's profitable for both. If it's jarring and we don't get along and we don't have the same understanding of things, then it's going to take a lot of time and then you're going to give up. So that's not all collaboration is going to end good. And we have some bad experience and we have some great experience, but when it's great, it's very great. That's
it makes sense. And so trying to dig in a little bit more deeper on challenges and push on this, are there any practices, you don't have to name names, any practices in philanthropy that you think are just not moving us in the right direction, or anything that you think is probably not as helpful as people might think it is, whether in Canada or elsewhere?
Oh my God, I don't know. I don't focus so much on the negative practices. I try like for instance, I was gonna say like we just announced, well, we just decided that we're gonna follow the trust-based philanthropy, so like we're focusing on the positive and the people that are doing inspired work. In terms of negative practice, I think it's not so much a practice in itself, but it's more a tendency that we can have, is that it can be sometimes performative. Like we have checklists sometimes, and that's something that like EDI is not like new, like people have been talking about it for a while now, and a lot of people saw it like a market, like you can commodify EDI, it's a business now. So but it's not, it's not meant to be a business. Like it's a business because we're in a capitalist society, I guess, but it's about doing good, it's about making sure we're there for everyone. So I think like the thing I could like criticize is like not see this as a checklist of things you need to do to be like a good foundation. It's about like, ask yourself, why are you doing it? Where for what,
Yeah, exactly. That seems a third rail you don't want to touch, right? To be able to seem like you're performative. I wonder what exactly does Béati do to sort of stay away from being performative, right? I know that you do a lot of actual work, but sort of in what other ways is it sort of is that sort of embedded in your practices?
We re-questions ourselves a lot. I think it's like, for example, and we stay connected to the groups. So even before we were there, like the people we have that works with the groups have a very privileged relationship with them. And like just recently we did a survey to sort of get feedback from them. And some of them were so generous, and they they see it as a partnership. It's not just like we're saying we're partners. They see it as a partnership because every time we spend time with them, it's beneficial to them because we're listening to them and we're not there to police what they're doing. We're there to see like, what can we do? So these are things that needs to be nurtured. Like, this is where we choose to put our energy, is in the relationship, is in the collaboration. It's in thinking that maybe we thought something and then it turns out, well, it wasn't enough. Like, we have an indigenous recognition, how do you say it in English? And in the territorial recognition, we have it, we wrote it, but we have to reactualize it every year. You know, we have to look back. Is it still coherent? What did we do this year more? So we gave ourselves, we decided that the day of reconciliation, it's going to be a day where we're going to spend our time to educate ourselves on those issues, because we don't have that proximity with Indigenous people. Like, I think we have 2 groups that are from Indigenous communities, but that's it. Like, we don't have people representing them in our selection committee. We don't have anyone in our team. So like, how do we make sure that we at least do our part to understand what is happening, you know? So these are like, how do you go further every time? And you start with something simple. It's okay to start with like the checklist is not a problem in itself. Is when you stay there that it becomes an issue. So it's always about just, it's not a destination. Like, it's a journey. You have to feel like we are embodying every day, every little step we're doing is toward that goal, that mission we have, but knowing that there is not a fixed image. We don't know what it looks like, a world that is very equitable and a world that is like with no one knows that. Like, it never happened. I don't think so.
I mean, yeah, in my dreams, perhaps. No, but I think you're totally right? Sort of, it's an interesting way of thinking about sort of doing this sort of work and thinking about it as an exercise rather than as a destination, right? Something that we're consistently doing, something that is requires a lot of understanding, of making mistakes and of, you know, learning, right, and switching gears. And I think that's probably what is hard, right? Sort of, you need resources and you need time to be doing that constantly, right?
But that's also a choice, you know.
Yeah.
You give yourself time. It's, yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
No. Yeah. Please elaborate. What do you think about?
Well, because it's also like, where are we spending our time if we're not doing that? So like, I'm not saying like, of course, there's a lot of things that needs to be done for the machine and all, but they need this to be this moment to see like, okay, where are we spending our time? What can we cut, or what can we like be more efficient in? And what are the things that we can do that are the steps that will get us further, you know? So I think it's about balancing those two. And this is always like a very like, almost every time you can have like this sort of like, where are we at? And that's the journey we're having with you. Is like, that's why we started with New Power Lab. Is like within the ADI, we don't know where we're at the moment. So we needed like, what's our starting point? Like, we do some certain good things and some things probably like very bad. So what are the things and what can we do? We have no ideas yet. Like, we're at the beginning. I think it's something that wasn't necessarily mentioned but we're at the beginning of the process with you still. So we don't have reports yet. We don't know like, what are the results? We don't know how good or bad we are, but we started.
Yeah, no, totally. And this is a great segue into sort of our last few questions, which are about sort of our partnership. As part of your exercise journey, you've partnered with us, NPL, on something we call the People and Capital Data Project. This project seeks to collect diversity data, self-reported diversity data on your organization, as well as portfolio data, to help you, but in general, our organizations assess what they look like and who they give money to. And as sort of we've hinted at throughout this conversation, this is a big commitment in terms of time and energy. Can you perhaps speak to why you think collecting these sort of data, you've already hinted a little bit about this, but perhaps put a finer point on it. Why do you think collecting data on what your organization looks like and who you're funding is important to you?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I touched on it a little bit, but the real, like, for us, the angle we really like struggle with is where do we put our money? Like, where are we, like, who are we financing, and who is deciding who we're financing? Not the groups. The groups, it's more like a practice that we have been like doing for years now. But in terms of investment, understanding like the impact of that, if that's where like we need more data, and we need to know where we're at this, because it's 95% of our capital, like it's 95% of all the money. So like we could be doing so much worse or so much better with that 95 than with that 5%. So this is why like this this partnership is so important to us, to know where we're at, where we're going. And our mission, like there's a lot of promise within our mission. Like we promise like solidarity and all of that. Like we need to honor that. Like we need to be the allies that we're saying. So like how do we make sure we're coherent, we're relevant, and we're the good actors? Otherwise, like we should just give the money to someone else, and
Yeah. Yeah. I think the way you're talking about it is sort of the right way to think about it, right? Sort of like, how can we, in this journey of trying to make sure that you're doing your best, right? What other inputs can we collect, right, to sort of ensure that we have information about how we're performing? And so something that people might not know is that you are one of our first 5 prototype members, meaning that you're in some ways are guinea pigs, right? You're part of this cohort of organizations that are helping us test this tool for the first time. It's a collection of surveys and other data collection tools that we are hoping to launch in a public beta earlier next year. Can you tell us why being part of this early phase was important to you, and perhaps speak a little bit about how you've helped us work through and test these tools?
Yeah, I think that's where the idea of collaboration and it being like a two-way road like makes sense. Is that we share the same values, we share the same mission, we just have different expertise. And this is where, if we can help you, you're helping us, and if you're helping us, we're helping you. So this is where it was an amazing collaboration. Like I said, we have other people who does EDI scans, but usually it focuses a lot of HR and on governance, but it goes way deeper than that. So you have this both like understanding how to analyze those data, and that sort of mission that is part of your DNA, and that sort of understanding of what is social justice. So just knowing that, like, there's a perfect match. And so if you needed like guinea pigs to be able to make sure your machine is running well, that's amazing, because for us, it's a great exercise also to do, because we were at that same point when we met. Like we were like, we don't have the data. And you're like, we can manage data, but we don't have guinea pigs. So it was like so that's how it happens. And that's like, I mean, that's the whole positive thing, is like, we're not just doing our work for us to know where we're at, but we end up helping like a practice that should be more present there. Like that, like ScanID should go beyond HR and governance, and the people who run these, like, I don't know them all, so I'm talking a little bit out of context maybe, but ScanID should never be just like a commodity or something you have to just buy and it's a service and they tell you what you say. We want people who tell us the true things. Like, we want to be told we're wrong. Like, if I don't need a certificate, I need someone to tell me like what are the things I can do better.
Yeah, I love your metaphor of a guinea pig. I mean, perhaps of a sacrificial guinea pig in this case. I'm gonna have to get back to our team and ask if we can make guinea pigs our mascot. But I think it speaks to this idea that I think that I really value as well, which is like, we're on this journey, we're at the ground level, we're doing sort of different parallel projects, but sort of which at base are coming from our same foundational values, right? And so to the degree that we can find ways to collaborate with each other, then we make the whole experience, I guess, I want to say enjoyable, because the more partners we have that are that are aligned in values, better, but also more truthful, right? Because in earlier stages we have, I guess, uh, the the ability to learn from what is working, what is not working, and sort of using that to sort of figure out how we're going to expand a tool or resources to other organizations. So yeah, thank you so much for that reflection. I guess any last thoughts on our partnership before we move on to the Q&A?
No, I'm just very curious to see if people have questions about
Yeah.
what.
I think after the guinea pig, we hit the nail on the head with the guinea pig. Now we've said
we're
enough.
just happy guinea pigs, and if people want to ask us like hard question, like go ahead. But maybe just like what you were saying about like the fact that we are helping each other, like scratching each other's back, whatever. I think that even was an extra argument for our boards and committee to participate, because it's like, we're not just doing this, we're also helping this other like organization, and they're helping us. So all of that is like very just positive energy,
Amazing. Thanks so much, Maya. Fantastic conversation. I'm going to turn it over to our public to see what questions they may have. Please use the Q&A to put any questions that you might have, and I'm gonna hit Maya with some of them. So this is from Joanne. I am curious if and where the board of the foundation, the directors, the chair are directly involved or leading versus staff led, the sorts of dynamics. I'm assuming in terms of EDI work, sort of what are the differences between, directors and higher level people on boards versus staff? Where are these efforts coming from? And what do those dynamics look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, the partnership with the New Power Lab came from our director. So she was very involved at the beginning, and then she gave it back to me. So like I was explaining at the beginning, we're only 3, so like we end up, like I do communication, but we end up doing more than what our title says. And in terms of the board, they're not active, but we've recently created a governance committee. So they're going to take a certain role, like they played a little role in like placing and preparing the board, but they're not like active in the sense that they're not leading it. And we're like I was saying, also we're very still at the beginning, so maybe they'll participate a little bit more furthermore, but for now it's been mostly within the team. And yeah.
Cool. And I guess just to follow up on this particular question, do you find that a lot of the drive to do sort of to reach out to other organizations that are active on sort of EDI practices comes from, from within your organization, like from within the staff of the organization, or is there a lot of push from board or other people on committees and stuff like that?
Let's say it depends who's the staff and who's the board.
Right.
Because if you have a board that is more anchored in those conversations, it will probably come more from the board. And if it comes from, I think all of the employees worked in community service, not community service, but nonprofits. Mm-hmm. So for us, it came a little bit more from the team in our case. It's really about like, where are the people anchored? But I think it needs, either way, the conversation needs to happen in both spaces. Right. And I don't know, maybe it's more important that it comes from the team because they're more like every day in the business, in the organization. So, but I don't know. It's a good question. I don't have a perfect answer.
No, I think that makes sense, right? Sort of. I guess my question, I guess, is, do you feel like, in thinking about people in peer organizations, do you feel like the staff is mostly aligned across these organizations with regards to the importance of doing EDI work, or is there like a lot of different opinions on that, even at the staff level?
In our example, I can't talk for others, but in our example, we're pretty much aligned, and I think that's
Yeah.
why it works very well. And
Yeah.
if we really have the same also capacity to challenge each other's like perception and try not to also like be mindful of not recreating our own echo chamber, because that's also often what it happens. So that's why we need the mechanism, because it's easy to fall back on like, oh, I know someone, or it's easy to fall back in these like sort of habits, and like that's why we need to create these structures to help us like force ourselves to open up to other people or other point of view, so that we don't stay within our own bubbles.
Yeah, totally hear you. So we have a question here from Sarah. Can you speak more about the foundation's selection committee? Who's on the committee? What does this process look like, presumably with an eye to things like EDI?
Okay. So every year we found 6 new projects, and the process is, it's going to change because we just adopted trust-based foundation. So it's going to be like a little bit more easier, but basically we received like almost 100 propositions. So that's a lot. That's something we're working on to try to reduce it. And then we do a pre-selection of 16. And the person who follows the philanthropy sector of our organization meets them all and takes all the information she can to have like a sort of a document on each of the 16 selected groups, and they are given to the committee. The committee is 8 people that we keep anonymous because we don't want them to feel pressured from the outside. Who comes, we are very mindful to, because we are we serve groups from all around Quebec, we are very mindful to have people from Montreal, but also from around the province. We're very mindful to have people with different expertise, but connected to the group. So people who either work on fields or have like expertise that are expertise or like from their experience as workers or as advocacy people or activists. That's the word I was looking for earlier. Either from like activists or people who, from their body of work, they are more connected on the field. So these are like these are like sort of the portrait we look for. It's not so much about like having a checklist, but about making sure there's like a balance of perspective around the table. They usually, I think, stay about 2 years, and it rolls afterward. They can come back, but it rolls. And this year is the first year we're finally giving them like $500 each to compensate, because it is a long process. We give them like 16 projects to read, and they need to analyze it. They really enjoy it. Like it's a very fun day, because we invite them all on a day and a half, and we have these conversations, and then there's a vote at the end. And they enjoy it a lot. Like it's very fun, but like it's work. So we finally can, like, that's another like question of accessibility that was maybe a dead angle before. It's okay, but if people are not paid, we're not having necessarily all the voices, because some people can come, like some people have other issues. So these are all questions that are like, it's a constant work in progress. I don't know if you need me to go further. I can like explain more details, but I'm trying.
No, that's fantastic as an overview, and have two sort of follow-ups. One is as you sort of think and rethink about what this process looks like, how do you evaluate whether or not you're doing a good or a better job than before? I guess I'll leave it there, and I'll ask the second question later.
Like, how do we make sure we're rethinking? We always ask for feedback at the end. Like, there's always a time for feedback from the committee. We also try to stay connected to what are the new practices, that is happening. What are the new thought process? What are like maybe that's a privilege we have. I don't know. We are connected to like researchers and people who bring up these questions and question those boundaries. And yeah, I think it's been mostly organic, but that's a real question. Like, how do we systemize that sort of self-restriction? Like, that's a good thought. We have like been implementing some evaluation in different ways, but it's
not for your programs, not for the overall selection.
Like I think this is the first year we actually sent a survey to the groups to ask them like more specific feedback, because we get organic feedback because we are in constant communication with them. But how do we like systemize it a little bit more so we can have more like data? This is where we're at.
Cool. And then the second question I had is sort of related to this conversation we're having right now, which is sort of what are the gaps that you see in sort of the way that you're moving capital, right? And how are you trying to address those issues?
Outside of the selection committee, you mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can touch on, well, yeah, sure.
I mean, I think it's we didn't have a clarity necessarily of where do we invest. This is where like we needed to dig in a little bit more and who is deciding where we invest. And maybe I would say within the selection committee is very diverse, but we were lacking probably diversity within our board, within our other committees. Even within the team, I mean, like I'm the only racialized person and I don't even look it. So that's the yeah, there's been these like realization that, and who do we give our contract to? You know, are they just people we know, or are we like opening up, like for example, if we're gonna redesign this website, like who are we gonna select? You know, are we just gonna select the friend of someone? And if we're all the same people, well, we're gonna select someone that looks like us.
Yeah.
So these are all like, yeah, these are the gaps maybe. Like I'm very too transparent.
No, thank you so much. I think something that we really appreciate about this conversation, about our partnership with you, is your ability to be sort of honest and transparent about sort of your learnings, and I really appreciate that. And before we leave you, Maya, we have one final Q&A again from Sarah. I'm curious to hear if Béati also funds organizations' capacity building and strengthening, and if so, have you had reflections on how to center JEDI in capacity building?
Could you define this capacity building? What do you mean?
Sarah, I'm unsure what she means specifically.
Is it like about empowerment and like not?
I mean, capacity building typically means sort of like building up staff training on perhaps some things related to equity, diversity, and inclusion.
We don't finance services. That's like a posture we have, but the conversation has been open that maybe certain groups, they're not in a, like, because one of the statement we have is we found collective and we found people who want to change this, the system, you know, that are in systemic change. Right now, that's what we do. I can't like pretend but we are having these conversations where we're realizing that certain groups, they're not there. They don't have the energy to do advocacy. They don't have energy to be working on the systemic. They have this reality where they need to work on themselves. We have a whole like priority that is more about spirituality, like quête de sens in French. I don't remember how we say it in English, but everything that is more spiritual, that we're trying maybe to see, okay, could we transform this and make it more about care, about empowerment, about like, can it take another form? We're in these conversations, but to be bluntly honest, right now, that's not what we finance.
Cool. Thanks so much, everyone, for your questions, and thanks, Maya, for taking your time and answering them. All right, so just three takeaways from our conversation. One, and this is from insights that Maya has shared with us, is one that institutionalizing equity, diversity, and inclusion principles and practices is really important to ensure that these values will be sustained as sort of the sector grows, as an organization grows. I think it's a very valuable point to make. A second point that sort of surfaced was that to live equity, diversity, and inclusion principles really means, at least for Béati, but I think it probably resonates with a lot of people, means remaining close to the communities we're trying to work with. And so I think that that's extremely valuable and really important to keep in mind. And then a third point, and this is sort of in reflection of our partnership together, data collection can be an important pillar to understand where we are in the exercise of doing equity, diversity, and inclusion. And to Béati specifically, this is helpful to sort of honor your mission to be a strong allies to the communities you work for. And in reflection of our partnership, we both NPL and Béati are sort of in this to learn together, right? Not really to sell products around sort of EDI, which we probably disagree with a little bit, but really take advantage of each other's strengths to sort of build tools that might be helpful for others as they embark on similar journeys. So thank you so much to everyone, to our audience for your support and commitment to make capital flow more equitably across Canada. Before you leave, we'd love to get your feedback on the session. And so I'm going to get Han to put up a poll. Maya, before I let you go, any closing thoughts?
No, just thank you, and like just start somewhere, even if it like seems very basic. Like it doesn't have to be complicated, and it can be like so rewarding.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much, Maya, again, for bringing your depth of knowledge and candor to this conversation. I'm sure that our audience members really appreciates the work that Béati is doing, and we hope that we'll have an opportunity to spark more conversations around the work that foundations are doing with regards to equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we encourage everyone to stay connected with Fondation Béati on their website, fondationbeati.org, and to stay in touch with us at newpowerlabs.org. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to Han for helping set up the webinar. And thank you, Maya.
Thank you.
See you soon, everyone.